The humid afternoon air in Cotabato City carried the familiar scent of grilled fish and burning charcoal that always reminded Manny Pacquiao of home. He had returned to Mindanao for a charity event, but something deeper had drawn him back to these streets where his childhood dreams first took shape. The champion boxer walked slowly through the old neighborhood, his security detail maintaining a respectful distance as he absorbed the sights and sounds of a place that time seemed to have forgotten. Manny's eyes traced the cracked concrete walls and rusted tin roofs that housed countless families struggling to make ends meet. Each corner held a memory, each alleyway a story from his youth, when survival meant more than victory in any boxing ring. The weight of nostalgia pressed against his chest as he remembered running barefoot through these very streets, chasing dreams that seemed impossibly distant back then. The local community center buzzed with anticipation for his visit, but before the scheduled event, Manny had requested time to walk through his old haunts. His assistant, Benilda, had arranged for a quiet tour, understanding that these moments of reflection were sacred to the people's champion. The late afternoon sun cast long shadows across the narrow streets, creating a golden filter that made everything appear dreamlike. As they approached a small internet cafe where local youth gathered, the owner, an elderly man named Teodoro, rushed out with tears in his eyes. His weathered hands shook as he reached for Manny's, and his voice cracked with emotion as he shared news that would change the course of this homecoming visit. The old man spoke of Bayani, a name that instantly transported Manny back to his childhood, to days when two young boys shared impossible dreams under the scorching Mindanao sun. Bayani had been Manny's closest friend during those formative years, a boy whose laugh could brighten even the darkest days of poverty. They had spent countless hours together, sharing stories, dreams, and the kind of pure friendship that exists only in childhood. While Manny's path led to boxing glory and international fame, Bayani had taken a different route, one that ended behind the concrete walls of the Cotabato City jail. The revelation hit Manny like a physical blow. Teodoro explained that Bayani had been incarcerated for 3 years on charges related to illegal gambling, a common trap that ensnared many young men in the area who saw few legitimate opportunities for advancement. The irony was not lost on Manny that while he had fought his way out of poverty through boxing, his childhood companion had fought his battles in the streets and lost. Standing there in the fading daylight, Manny felt the full weight of fortune and circumstance. He thought about the countless moments when life could have taken him down a similar path, the razor-thin margin between success and struggle that defined so many lives in places like Cotabato. His hands clenched involuntarily, not in preparation for a fight, but in response to the overwhelming mix of guilt, sadness, and determination that surged through him. The champion's security team noticed the change in his demeanor immediately. His usual confident stride had given way to something more contemplative, more burdened. Jinky, his wife, had often spoken about how deeply Manny felt the responsibility of his success, how he carried the weight of representing not just himself, but everyone who had shared his struggles. Now, faced with the stark reality of his friend's situation, that weight seemed almost unbearable. Without hesitation, Manny made a decision that would define the rest of his visit to Cotabato. He turned to his entourage and announced his intention to visit the city jail immediately. The request caught everyone off guard, but those who knew Manny understood that when his heart was moved, nothing could deter him from action. As evening approached and the first stars appeared over Cotabato City, Manny Pacquiao prepared to face a reunion that would test not only his emotional strength, but also his commitment to never forgetting where he came from. The ride to Cotabato City jail felt longer than any championship bout Manny had ever endured. His black SUV navigated through increasingly narrow streets, each turn taking him further from the world of luxury and fame into the harsh reality that many of his childhood peers still faced. The transition was jarring yet familiar, reminding him of the countless times he had crossed between two worlds throughout his career. Manny stared out the tinted window, watching the urban landscape transform from modest homes to industrial buildings, and finally to the imposing concrete structure that housed society's forgotten. His hands rested on his knees, fingers occasionally trembling with anticipation and anxiety. The champion who had faced the world's most feared fighters now confronted something far more daunting than any opponent in the ring. His security chief, Vicente, had spent the past hour coordinating with jail officials, explaining the unprecedented nature of the visit. Word had already spread through the facility that the Pride of the Philippines was coming, creating a buzz of excitement among both inmates and staff. The warden, Isagani, had personally assured safe passage and privacy for what promised to be an emotionally charged reunion. As they approached the facility's main entrance, Manny's mind raced with memories of Bayani. He remembered his friend's infectious smile, his quick wit, and the way he could find humor even in their darkest moments of hunger and uncertainty. Bayani had been the dreamer, always spinning tales of the adventures they would have when they escaped poverty's grip. The cruel irony that one had soared to international heights while the other had fallen to such depths was not lost on Manny. The jail's exterior walls rose like monuments to human failure, topped with razor wire that caught the last rays of daylight. Guard towers stood sentinel at each corner, their occupants watching the unusual procession below with curiosity. This was not the typical visiting day, and the presence of multiple security vehicles and media personnel had transformed the routine evening into something extraordinary. Inside his vehicle, Manny closed his eyes and offered a silent prayer, as was his custom before any significant challenge. His faith had always been his anchor, but tonight it felt more necessary than ever. He prayed for strength, for wisdom, and most importantly, for the right words to comfort a friend who had lost his way. The weight of his own success felt heavier with each passing moment, knowing that fortune and circumstance had played such crucial roles in determining their different paths. Marilu, his longtime assistant, noticed the tension in his shoulders and the way his breathing had become more deliberate. She had witnessed Manny in countless high-pressure situations, but this felt different. This was personal, in a way that transcended sports, politics, or business. This was about loyalty, friendship, and the responsibility that comes with blessing. The vehicle finally stopped before the jail's main checkpoint. Security protocols required all visitors to undergo screening, regardless of status or fame. Manny welcomed the procedure, understanding that respect for institutional rules was paramount. The metal detector's beep seemed unnaturally loud in the confined space, echoing off the concrete walls that would soon surround him. As he walked through the facility's corridors, flanked by correctional officers, Manny absorbed the atmosphere of confinement, the sounds of distant conversations, the clang of metal doors, and the shuffle of feet created a symphony of human struggle that resonated deep within his soul. Each step brought him closer to a reunion that would test every principle he held dear about friendship, forgiveness, and hope. The final door before the visiting area stood before him, its small window offering a glimpse into a world he had narrowly avoided. On the other side waited Bayani, unaware that his childhood friend was about to walk back into his life. The visiting room's fluorescent lights cast harsh shadows across scarred metal tables and plastic chairs that had witnessed countless emotional reunions and heartbreaking farewells. Manny entered the sterile space, his eyes immediately scanning the room until they found the figure sitting alone at the far table. 25 years had passed since their last meeting, but recognition was instantaneous and devastating. Bayani sat hunched forward, his once vibrant frame now gaunt and weathered by the harsh realities of incarceration. The boy who had once raced through the streets of Cotabato with boundless energy now moved with the careful deliberation of someone who had learned to navigate a world where every gesture carried consequence. His hair, prematurely gray at 38, caught the artificial light as he slowly raised his head. The moment their eyes met, time collapsed. Manny felt his breath catch in his throat as he witnessed the transformation of his childhood companion. The sparkle that had once danced in Bayani's eyes had been replaced by something harder, more guarded, yet underneath it all, a flicker of the old warmth remained. The recognition was mutual and immediate, sending shockwaves through both men that neither had prepared for. Manny's legs felt unsteady as he approached the table, each step weighted with the gravity of their divergent paths. Behind him, the correctional officer, Jericho, maintained a respectful distance while staying alert to protocol. The champion's usual confident demeanor had completely evaporated, replaced by the vulnerable uncertainty of a man confronting his own fortune and the cruel randomness of fate. Bayani's hands rested on the metal table, and Manny noticed immediately how they had changed. Once smooth and quick, they now bore the calluses and scars of manual labor and survival. His friend's face had acquired lines that spoke of stress, regret, and the premature aging that comes with institutional life. Yet something in his posture suggested that seeing Manny had awakened something long dormant within him. As Manny took the seat across from his childhood friend, the weight of unspoken years settled between them like a physical presence. The silence stretched, heavy with memory and loss, neither man immediately capable of bridging the chasm that circumstances had created. Around them, other inmates conducted their own visits, but the world had narrowed to just these two souls, reconnecting across an impossible divide. The champion's eyes began to well with tears as he absorbed the full impact of what his friend had endured. Every luxury he had enjoyed, every triumph he had celebrated, every moment of joy with his family suddenly felt magnified against the backdrop of Bayani's confinement. The guilt was overwhelming, not because he had done anything wrong, but because fortune had smiled so differently upon two boys who had started from the same place. Bayani's own emotions were equally complex. Seeing his friend's success had always filled him with pride, even from a distance. The boy who had once shared his dreams of escape had not only achieved them, but had become a symbol of hope for millions. Yet sitting here now, the contrast between their lives felt almost unbearable. Pride mixed with shame, joy with sorrow, creating an emotional storm that threatened to overwhelm them both. The visiting room's harsh environment seemed to soften around them as the past flooded back. Memories of shared meals consisting of nothing but rice and hope, of dreams whispered under star-filled skies, of promises made with the innocent certainty that only childhood can provide. Those memories now felt both precious and painful, bridges to a time when anything seemed possible for both of them. Manny reached across the table, his movements slow and deliberate, extending his hand toward his friend. The gesture was simple yet profound, a bridge across the years and circumstances that had separated them. When their hands finally touched, the emotional dam that both men had been struggling to maintain finally gave way. The connection of their hands across the cold metal table unleashed a torrent of emotion that neither man could contain. Manny's tears fell freely now, each drop carrying the weight of guilt, love, and profound sorrow for the path his friend had taken. The champion, who had learned to control every muscle in his body, every breath in the ring, found himself completely vulnerable in this moment of raw human connection. Bayani's own tears followed, streaming down cheeks that had grown hollow during his years of confinement. The hardened exterior that prison life demanded melted away in the presence of the one person who remembered him not as an inmate or a criminal, but as the boy who had once shared dreams under the vast Mindanao sky. His shoulders shook with the release of emotions he had suppressed for years, the careful guard he maintained for survival temporarily abandoned. Around them, the visiting room had fallen unusually quiet. Other inmates and their families seemed to sense the profound nature of what was unfolding at the corner table. Even the correctional officers, including Emile, who had been working at the facility for over a decade, found themselves moved by the raw display of friendship and loss. This was not the typical reunion they witnessed between celebrity and admirer, but something far more fundamental and human. Manny's mind raced through memories of their childhood together. He remembered the way Bayani would share his meager lunch even when he had barely enough for himself, the countless nights they had slept side by side on cardboard mats, protecting each other from the cold and from the dangers that lurked in their neighborhood. Those memories felt both precious and painful now, highlighting the innocence they had once shared and the harsh realities that had ultimately separated them. The champion recalled their last meeting before his boxing career took off, when they were both 17 and standing at the crossroads of their futures. Bayani had been the one to encourage him to pursue boxing seriously, even sacrificing his own opportunity to train so that Manny could have more time at the gym. The selflessness of that gesture now felt like a dagger to Manny's heart, knowing that his friend's generosity had contributed to his own success while Bayani struggled alone. Other inmates in the visiting room began to recognize the significance of what they were witnessing. Thomas, a long-term prisoner who had watched countless visitors come and go, whispered to his cellmate Ariel about the legendary boxer's presence. Word spread quickly through the room, but rather than creating chaos, it seemed to generate a respectful silence, as if everyone understood they were witnessing something sacred. The facility's warden, Enrico, observed from the security office through the monitors, his own eyes misting as he watched the reunion unfold. In his 15 years of managing the institution, he had never seen anything quite like this display of genuine brotherhood. The image of the world champion weeping openly for his incarcerated friend challenged every assumption about success, fame, and human connection. Manny's security detail, positioned strategically around the perimeter, found themselves unexpectedly moved by their employer's vulnerability. They had protected him through countless public appearances, championship fights, and political events, but they had never seen him so emotionally exposed. The man they knew as confident and controlled had been reduced to his most fundamental human elements by the power of friendship and shared history. The afternoon light filtering through the visiting room's barred windows began to fade, casting longer shadows across the emotional scene. Time seemed suspended as both men allowed themselves to fully experience the weight of their reunion. The artificial barriers of success and failure, freedom and confinement, seemed meaningless in the face of their enduring bond. Bayani's hand squeezed Manny's tighter, a gesture that communicated more than words ever could. In that grip was forgiveness, pride, love, and the unbreakable connection forged in the crucible of shared poverty and dreams. The boy who had once promised to change the world alongside his friend was acknowledging that perhaps, in some way, that promise had been kept after all. As their emotional connection deepened, Manny began to truly absorb the environment surrounding his friend. The visiting room's institutional atmosphere felt oppressive, with its concrete walls painted in faded institutional green and the constant hum of fluorescent lighting that never quite provided enough warmth. Every detail of the space spoke to the systematic removal of dignity and hope, making Bayani's survival all the more remarkable. The champion's eyes traced the changes in his friend's appearance with growing concern. Bayani's once broad shoulders now carried the weight of years spent in confinement, his posture reflecting the psychological burden of isolation and regret. The vibrant energy that had once made him the center of every childhood gathering had been tempered by harsh reality, replaced by a quiet resignation that broke Manny's heart. Other visitors in the room continued their own conversations in hushed tones, but many found their attention drawn to the emotional reunion unfolding before them. Carlo, visiting his brother for the first time in months, paused his own conversation to witness the profound display of loyalty and friendship. The sight of the famous boxer openly weeping for his incarcerated friend challenged every assumption about celebrity and success. Manny's mind raced with possibilities and plans. His wealth and influence had opened countless doors throughout his career. But sitting here facing his friend's reality, he understood that some problems couldn't be solved with money or fame alone. The legal system, the complexities of incarceration, and the long road to rehabilitation would require patience, persistence, and resources that went beyond his individual power. The visiting room's security cameras captured every moment of the reunion, creating a record that would later be viewed by facility administrators and legal officials. Joaquin, the chief security officer monitoring the feeds, found himself unexpectedly moved by the raw humanity on display. In a system designed to process people as numbers and cases, this moment stood as a powerful reminder of the individual stories and broken dreams behind every inmate. Bayani's transformation during their reunion was equally profound. The hardened expression he had worn upon entering the visiting room gradually softened as childhood memories flooded back. For the first time in years, he allowed himself to remember the boy he had once been, the dreams they had shared, and the hope that had once seemed so abundant. Manny's presence had awakened something within him that institutional life had nearly extinguished. The afternoon's emotional intensity began to take its physical toll on both men. Manny's usual perfect posture had given way to the slumped shoulders of someone carrying enormous emotional weight. His hands trembled slightly as he maintained contact with his friend, drawing strength from their connection while simultaneously feeling overwhelmed by the responsibility it represented. Around them, the visiting room's rhythm continued, but their corner had become a sanctuary of sorts. Andres, a correctional officer with 20 years of experience, positioned himself nearby to provide privacy while ensuring security protocols were maintained. Even the most hardened staff members found themselves affected by the genuine nature of the reunion, a reminder that redemption and hope existed even within these concrete walls. As the designated visiting time began to wind down, both men seemed to sense the approaching end of their reunion. The artificial time constraints of institutional life would soon force them apart again, but something fundamental had changed in both of them. The connection they had re-established transcended the physical barriers of the prison, creating a bond that would endure regardless of walls, time, or circumstance. Manny's tears had evolved from initial shock and grief to something deeper and more purposeful. His friend's situation had awakened not just emotion, but determination, a resolve to ensure that this reunion marked not just a moment of connection, but the beginning of meaningful change in Bayani's life. The profound connection between Manny and Bayani had begun to create ripples throughout the entire visiting room. Other inmates who had initially maintained their focus on their own visitors found themselves stealing glances at the emotional reunion unfolding at the corner table. For many of them, witnessing such genuine care and loyalty from someone who had achieved global success provided a rare glimpse of hope in their otherwise constrained world. Roberto, a middle-aged inmate serving his final year of a drug-related sentence, sat with his elderly mother, but found his attention repeatedly drawn to the champion's tears. In his 23 months of incarceration, he had never witnessed such raw emotion from a visitor, let alone someone of Manny's stature. The sight challenged his cynical view that success inevitably led to forgetting one's roots and abandoning old friendships. The correctional staff had also been profoundly affected by the reunion. Dante, a veteran guard who had worked at the facility for nearly 2 decades, found himself reconsidering many of his assumptions about human nature and loyalty. Throughout his career, he had witnessed countless visits that ended in disappointment, anger, or gradual abandonment as families grew tired of supporting incarcerated loved ones. This reunion represented something entirely different and unexpectedly powerful. Manny's emotional state continued to evolve as the visit progressed. The initial shock of seeing his friend in such circumstances had given way to a deeper contemplation of responsibility and possibility. His mind raced through potential legal options, rehabilitation programs, and the complex web of bureaucracy that surrounded the criminal justice system. The champion, who had always found solutions through determination and hard work, now faced challenges that required patience and systematic approach. Bayani seemed to draw strength from his friend's unwavering attention and obvious commitment. The isolation that had characterized his incarceration began to lift, replaced by the recognition that he had not been forgotten or written off by those who had known him in better times. The shame that had weighed heavily on his shoulders for years began to transform into something more hopeful, though still fragile and uncertain. The visiting room's atmosphere had subtly shifted due to their presence. Conversations among other families seemed more subdued and respectful, as if everyone recognized they were witnessing something significant and sacred. Inigo, a young guard in his first year of service, would later describe the moment as transformative to his understanding of his role in the correctional system. As word of the reunion spread beyond the visiting room, other inmates throughout the facility began to take notice. Noel, who shared a cell block with Bayani, had known about his cellmate's famous childhood friend, but had never imagined such a reunion would actually occur. The news traveled through the institution's informal communication networks, bringing unexpected attention to someone who had previously kept a low profile during his incarceration. Manny's security team observed the changing dynamics around them with professional interest and personal curiosity. Leonardo, his head of security, had protected the champion through countless public appearances, but had never seen such genuine vulnerability from his employer. The display of authentic emotion in such a challenging environment only deepened his respect for the man he had sworn to protect. The warden, monitoring the situation from his office, began to consider the broader implications of this visit. Enrico understood that high-profile visits could create both opportunities and complications within the facility's carefully maintained order. However, the genuine nature of this reunion and its obvious positive impact on both the visitor and the inmate suggested that this particular situation might yield more benefits than challenges. As the designated visiting time approached its conclusion, both men seemed to sense the approaching separation. The artificial constraints of institutional schedules would soon force them apart, but the foundation for ongoing connection had been firmly established. The promise of continued support hung in the air between them, unspoken but understood by both parties. As the visiting session neared its end, Manny's focus shifted from pure emotion to practical action. The champion's business instincts, honed through years of navigating complex negotiations and high-stakes decisions, began to engage alongside his personal commitment to his friend. He started mentally cataloging the steps necessary to provide meaningful support for Bayani's rehabilitation and eventual reintegration into society. The warden, Crispin, approached their table with respectful caution, understanding the delicate nature of the situation while recognizing the potential opportunities that such high-profile support might bring to their rehabilitation programs. His 20-year career in corrections had taught him to recognize genuine commitment when he saw it, and Manny's emotional investment was clearly authentic and substantial. Manny's conversation with the warden revealed the depth of his determination to help his friend. His questions were specific and informed, covering topics from legal representation to vocational training programs available within the facility. The champion's approach demonstrated not just emotional support, but a practical understanding of the systemic challenges facing incarcerated individuals seeking genuine rehabilitation. Bayani watched his friend's interaction with facility staff with a mixture of amazement and growing hope. The boy who had once shared dreams of escape from poverty was now wielding influence and resources to potentially transform his current nightmare into an opportunity for redemption. The reality of having such powerful advocacy was almost overwhelming after years of feeling forgotten by the outside world. Other inmates throughout the visiting room had become increasingly aware of the significant conversation taking place at the corner table. Victor, serving time for theft, found himself listening intently as Manny discussed possibilities for educational programs and legal support. The champion's obvious commitment to his friend had begun to inspire hope among other prisoners who had long ago given up on receiving similar support from their own past connections. The correctional officers assigned to supervise the visit found themselves witnesses to something unprecedented in their careers. Armando, a 15-year veteran of the system, later remarked that he had never seen such genuine concern from a visitor of Manny's stature. The champion's willingness to engage with institutional policies and procedures demonstrated respect for the system, while clearly indicating his intention to work within it for his friend's benefit. Manny's legal team, contacted during the visit, began immediate research into Bayani's case and potential avenues for appeal or sentence reduction based on good behavior and participation in rehabilitation programs. The champion's resources allowed for rapid mobilization of expert legal opinion and strategic planning that few inmates could ever access independently. The emotional atmosphere in the visiting room had evolved throughout the afternoon, from initial shock and grief to something more hopeful and action-oriented. Jaime, a social worker who regularly counseled inmates and their families, observed that the quality of hope being generated by this reunion was qualitatively different from typical family visits. The combination of emotional support and practical resources created a powerful foundation for genuine rehabilitation. As the official visiting time concluded, both men understood that this reunion marked not an ending, but a beginning. The artificial constraints of prison schedules could force physical separation, but the commitment and resources now mobilized on Bayani's behalf ensured that meaningful support would continue regardless of institutional barriers. The facility's administration began immediate discussions about accommodating ongoing support for what was clearly becoming a model case of community-based rehabilitation assistance. Ernesto, the deputy warden responsible for rehabilitation programs, recognized that documenting and supporting this process could provide valuable insights for helping other inmates with similar potential. The ripple effects of this visit extended far beyond the immediate participants. Other inmates began to reconsider their own relationships and the possibility of rebuilding connections with people from their past. The demonstration that success did not necessarily require abandoning old friendships provided a powerful counter-narrative to the cynicism that often pervaded institutional environments. As the final minutes of their reunion ticked away, both men prepared for a separation that felt fundamentally different from their original parting 25 years earlier. This time, concrete plans and committed resources ensured that their renewed connection would endure and grow stronger with time. The final moments of their reunion carried a weight that neither man had anticipated when the visit began. As the correctional officers prepared to escort inmates back to their cells, Manny and Bayani shared a prolonged handshake that transcended mere farewell. Their grip conveyed promises unspoken, commitments that would endure long after the visiting room's doors closed between them. Manny's transformation during the visit was evident to everyone who witnessed it. The global celebrity who had entered the facility hours earlier emerged as something deeper and more purposeful. His tears had dried, but his eyes now held a determination that his security team recognized from his most important championship preparations. This was no longer just about reunion. It was about redemption and responsibility on a scale that extended far beyond personal friendship. Bayani's posture had changed dramatically throughout their time together. The defeated slouch that had characterized his entrance to the visiting room had been replaced by something resembling the confident bearing he had possessed in childhood. Hope, carefully guarded after years of disappointment, began to manifest in subtle ways that other inmates immediately recognized and found inspiring. The ripple effects of their reunion continued to spread throughout the facility, even as visiting hours officially ended. Elmer, a long-term inmate who had observed the entire interaction from across the room, found himself writing his first letter home in over 2 years, inspired by the demonstration of enduring loyalty he had witnessed. The champion's commitment to his friend had challenged assumptions about success, fame, and the obligations that come with both. As Manny prepared to leave the facility, he took one final look around the visiting room that had become the stage for such profound emotional reconnection. The institutional green walls and harsh fluorescent lighting seemed less oppressive now, transformed by the human connection that had flourished within them. His mental notes included specific details about improving conditions for future visits and supporting rehabilitation programs. The correctional staff who had witnessed the reunion found themselves discussing it long after their shifts ended. Ruben, a counselor who worked with inmates on reintegration planning, recognized that the resources and advocacy now available to Bayani could serve as a model for supporting other prisoners with rehabilitation potential. The practical implications of high-profile community support were significant and encouraging. Outside the facility, word of the reunion had begun to spread through Cotabato City's close-knit community. Tanchel, the owner of a local restaurant where both boys had once worked odd jobs, heard the news and immediately began planning a welcome celebration for when Bayani eventually regained his freedom. The story resonated deeply with residents who remembered both young men and understood the profound nature of their reconnection. As Manny's convoy departed the jail complex, he carried with him not just the emotional weight of reunion, but the practical burden of commitment. His phone was already buzzing with calls from legal advisors, rehabilitation specialists, and community leaders eager to support what was clearly becoming a significant reintegration effort. The champion's influence would now be directed toward a cause as meaningful as any championship he had ever pursued. The setting sun cast long shadows across Cotabato City as Manny's vehicle navigated the familiar streets of his childhood. The boy who had once fled poverty through boxing had returned as a man capable of transforming lives through compassion and commitment. His reunion with Bayani had reminded him that true victory was measured not just in championships won, but in lives lifted and friendships honored. Behind the prison walls, Bayani returned to his cell with a lightness he had not felt in years, carrying the promise of a future that suddenly seemed possible again.